Good evening. Welcome back to Mind Matters. We would love to hear from you. The number to call in or Skype is 678-619-1402, 678-619-1402. That number again is 678-619-1402. And this evening we have been talking about love and homicide. And earlier we said that 55% of all female murder victims die at the hands of a former or present spouse or lover, and nearly all male murders claim they did it out of love.
Out of love.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I want to read this one quote from OJ. This is what he said regarding the murder of his wife, Nicole. He said, this is exact quote, "Let's say I committed the crime. Even if I did, it would have had to have been because I loved her very much, right?" OJ.
So did he just tell on himself? Mm-hmm. Again, this is a serious subject, and I know it's hard to find a little humor in it. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you just got to smile to keep from going crazy.
Yeah.
And again, I always got to reach back to them old songs that our parents and grandparents loved. Because as Luther Tingham told us one thing, is loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right. Oh. So at what point is love is a justification for domestic violence?
Never.
Never.
Right, never.
But unfortunately, you and I can sit here and say between us, because we're rational adults, never. But you counsel so many people who believe otherwise. Right. The abusers and the perpetrators. And the victim is in a situation where they're like, hey.
And this guy who truly believed that a woman needed beating every now and then to put her in her place, even though those were from his early years as a pimp, but he continued to manifest and believe that throughout the rest of his life.
Isn't that kind of synonymous? Where we have an individual now telling her if a woman needs to be beaten and put into place, isn't that right up there with making America great again?
Yes.
I mean, I'm just trying to understand the logic.
Control
violence,
and power. It has to do with control and power.
There you go.
Control and power.
So, Doc, explain to me the mentality of someone who believes that a woman needs to be beaten to put it, just to remind her to stay in her place.
Obviously, he has a very fragile sense of masculinity, so his masculinity is defined by his physical power over a woman, his control over a woman. So underlying that, he's got a very weak sense of masculinity, because a man who has a real strong sense of masculinity would not need to define himself by his physical power and control over a woman.
If that's the case, then how come pimps were so revered and looked up to and admired in the black community?
Well, I guess you're saying because it was a movie and people saw it, even though I never saw it.
Called Goldie and the Mac, Doc.
Well, I never saw it, but people saw it in the movie, got white. People emulate what they see in the movies and, try to replicate.
The actual pimps were long before the movie. The movie was based upon these pimps nationwide. And not only the admiration they received in the communities, which they plied their trade, but also the impressionable youth that dreamed to grow up like
right, who saw it in the movies and things and tried to live up to that expectation.
Well, long before they saw the movie, they saw them on the street.
Okay, the street.
They saw them driving the big cars. They saw them with their women out there, and they were gods in the community. And I hate to use the term like gods, but when you were so revered and looked up on, and see, this is where quote from Thomas Jefferson, I believe, really rings true to me. When good men see evil and do nothing about it, they're just as how should the word I say, culpable at the evildoers themselves. At what point? I know every brother, every father, every man, uncle in the black community, especially before integration. I know everyone wasn't a pimp.
Right.
I know every man wasn't a woman beater. I know every man never had the desire, nor was the type to be an Ike Turner. But at some point, they knew of those who were. They knew of those who were abusing. They knew of those who were using. They knew of those who were killing. What I don't think they knew is they had an obligation and a power, the ability to be part of the resolution of this.
See, I think you said power. Power is very key. If someone just made a comment that during slavery we had no power.
Not all of us didn't have power.
You remember
the movie Django?
Yes.
The character that Samuel L. Jackson played, his power was, as far as the slave master part as paid by Leonardo DiCaprio, he was empowered to keep the other blacks in place.
Exactly.
And he ruled with an iron thumb.
Right.
Or should I say he ruled with an iron fist. Because that limited amount of power he had. See, all the other blacks couldn't talk to the slave owner like he did. But he considered himself above them. Massa put me in place.
You know, you still have that syndrome today.
Absolutely.
The plantation still exists.
So when we start talking about power, it's funny how they say it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. But I think it's the love of power.
Yeah, power. Definitely.
Money doesn't bring power. It's certainly a component. But power puts you in a position to get the money that you want by any means necessary.
Look at who's in the White House. I mean, that's what that's about.
Well, you know.
Anyway, that's off the subject.
It's quite interesting as we're having this conversation because domestic violence numbers have never dropped, to the best of my knowledge. They're consistent generation after generation and generation. What we have done in a progression of time, we have become more diligent with the enforcement of domestic violence issues. We have now started to call out all individuals, male or females, regardless of what your occupation, your connection, your family, who you are, for domestic related issues. You know, I was surprised several years ago when here recently, one of the major pastors here, Creflo Dollar, when he was arrested for allegedly his daughter.
Yes,
I believe the daughter is
incident,
14,
right.
15 years old at the time. And, you know, disobedience by kids at that age, that rebellious stage is right about the right time. They wanted to go to a party or try to sneak out or something. And, you know, and I agree with him. You know, I don't know the extent of the physical force he used to restrain or to discipline his daughter, but I'm sitting there saying juvenile crime is at an all-time high. But yet, at the same time, when a parent chooses to discipline a child with, how should I say, in terms of enforcing home training versus just abusing the child, why is that a domestic violence incident? But yet, at the same time, we crying about domestic violence, but we want to allow parents to parent.
Well, I guess it's a matter of what form the physical or corporal punishment is taken. Oftentimes, it's out of anger and passion, and it's not controlled. It's often uncontrolled.
And that's the funny thing, I said. It's funny when, on an official level, they want to determine what's controlled violence and what's irrational violence. I don't care what term you put on it. Violence is violence.
Exactly. I agree.
Like, we have currently a senator appointed by the new governor. Her name is Miss Loeffler, I believe.
Okay.
And she's bragging about one of the ads, and I support it, or she said, what was it? She forwarded the bill of killing the world's deadliest terrorists.
Yes, yes.
And I'm saying to myself, you're on worldwide TV bragging about you contribute to the murder of another human being. At what point will you find it offensive or wrong if whoever that person was, that terrorist related, in your eye, they're terrorists, but to their family and all of them, they're a martyr.
Mm-hmm.
And what if they decide to do an eye for eye, tooth for tooth?
Exactly.
And yet, next thing you know, they'll be bragging about how they assisted in killing you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying to myself, wow, it's amazing. Even on official levels, we can justify murder.
Yes.
Murder is murder. I don't care what side you're on, who you are. Murder is murder.
Mm-hmm.
And as we sit here talking about crimes
and domestic violence and abuse and violence. I mean, parents will often say spare the rod, spoil the child, but the only problem is oftentimes, like I said, it's done out of anger and passion, and which is very negative.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because at what point, especially for the religious community that believes in spare the rod, spoil the child, feel that their right to parent is infringed? Because when does parenting, disciplining a child become domestic violence? That's my question.
Like when you're injuring and beating the child and bruises and all of that, that's violence. When you're injuring the child, that's violence.
But that was parenting 101 for centuries worldwide. And now, especially United States of America, in the last 30 years, and believe me, I'm not a fan of corporal punishment because I received enough of it, between elementary and high school. Hell, ninth grade, I was still being paddled by a vice principal because that was the punishment for when those of us were skipping school or minor infraction school. Then they call your parents and be like, hey, listen.
So junior high, so they used a paddle?
Are you kidding? I got beat in school by my vice principal. Then the parents came up there and got the paddle. And yes.
This is a public school?
This is public school.
Okay.
Up until the ninth grade, yes.
Was it a Catholic school?
We wasn't in Catholic. We good old fashioned in the hood black school.
Okay, I knew they did it in Catholic schools. I didn't know they did it in neighborhood schools.
And it's funny because they didn't beat you and didn't have to work. First of all, we grew up. I think I was the last generation where our respect for our parents was unconditional.
Yes.
In other words, we have not only for our parents, we have respect for our elders in our community.
And authority figures, police officers, teachers, parents, principals.
Better believe it. And there was no such thing as I'm going home telling my parents, my teacher don't like me, or my teacher beat me up, and my parents running up to that school fighting. The teacher want to know, putting their hand. It was just the opposite. First of all, I had the parents like everybody else in my community. Mind you, we were first generation. Most of us from West Indian, we were first generation. God forbid if our teacher called them at work and they had to leave work and come to school and deal with us for a disciplinary problem. You would rather be arrested. Our parents would come to that school. Our administrators, teachers, principals, whoever look the other way, and they go to work on you.
In the school, your parents.
Are you kidding? And the worst mistake you can sit there and say,
in the school.
Doc, I'm living witness
in
to
the school
physical
class, right in front of the class.
They did.
Yes, listen, light you up.
The teachers used to beat you too.
Yeah.
That's what he was saying.
The teachers would beat you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And we had, and trust me, my parents, my friends' parents, they weren't coming to school to be fighting on teachers or the administrator. Oh, you put your hands on my kid. You don't know my. First of all, our parents, no matter what, you did not leave this house and embarrass us. Home training was absolute. They used to tell us all the time, we send you to school for one reason only, to learn. You are not going to leave this house being a disciplinary problem in school. That was a direct reflection on them as parents. And when they got called off their job, which means they ain't get paid for the rest of the day or whatever, they had to come to school to deal with something you did, you best believe it wasn't a matter of domestic violence. It's a matter of reinforcing the values and the discipline and respect within the household. And as we finish up this segment, I can't help but thinking of all the cases that I worked in my career, juvenile rated, where parents did just that. And they were disciplining their kids, regardless of what age. Now, trust me, I'm experienced and smart enough to know when it's abuse. When parents are locking kids in the basements and parents are burning kids, so the kids are malnutrition, haven't been in school, been abused, sexually and molesting. That's a whole nother ballgame. But there are a lot of hard-working, very dedicated, family-oriented parent who don't play that nonsense. And even now, for a parent to have to discipline a child with the intent of this is discipline based upon the fact you're not going to be a fool in this household. You're not going to go to school and act a fool and even race, shape, or form let anyone believe that's what you do in the house. To me, that's not domestic violence. That's a parent being a good parent. We got juvenile crime that's out of control because parents now don't even know where their kids at. Even worse, they themselves.
But I don't necessarily equate discipline with physical discipline. I mean, you can discipline without physical. I mean, that's how.
Why should you legally, as a parent, not be able to spank, or as they say in the South, whoop your child?
Well, like I said, it depends on the extreme because sometimes people can carry it, to the point where
you get carried away.
Abuse.
That's when I have to make a judgment as an officer responding what was above and beyond, and then the court has a final say so to say what was your motivation and whether is this consistent? Right. Has this been something? Do we have a family that's dysfunctional? Well, when we look at a well-rounded family, that parents work hard, and this kid probably got caught up in the streets or gangs or whatever, or this girl is running away and hanging out with this deadbeat. At some point, talking had to stop, and our hands-on got to begin.
But that's not how I was raised. My father, like I said, we would sometimes say, just whoop us and get it over, because he would sit there and lecture us for hours, and we would just say, oh, please, can we get a whooping and just get this over with? And
so you'd rather get the whooping than the lecture at times?
Yeah, because he would be lecturing us for hours. We're like, oh my God, just give me a whooping and get it over with.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, and when he was giving you that lecture,
right?
And did at any point you sit there and go, did you even you forgot about the point of the lecture anymore?
Exactly.
You just like,
seriously, I remember saying, just give me a whooping and let me get this over with. Just yeah.
Wow.
So, right. Yeah.
Now, were there any of your siblings that even the lecture ain't do nothing for it because they were just out there?
Yeah. And that kind of, I would respond to the lectures, but other of my siblings would not. So if y'all are listening, you can talk about your experiences. But
you respond to the
lectures, right? But
were you always the goody two-shoe?
Yes.
Oh my God, Doc, you ever skip school?
Never. I had perfect attendance.
Really?
Really?
Are you bragging about that?
It's true. Wow. Never. Wow. Never skipped school a day in my life. Perfect attendance in high school. Never missed a day.
Of course, I'm not going to say I did that either. Not even close to it.
No.
I thought skipping school was, part of going to school.
Never.
But, my parents, I think probably about 14, 15, they stopped to be in like, boy, if you haven't got it by now, you ain't going to get it. So that's a waste of time. But I never lost any respect for my parents. Okay. I've never had the police bring me home. Okay. I've never got caught up in situations where they have to come to court because I robbed a bank or I'm selling drugs or I got caught up running with a gang. That was not my thing. I was nobody's poster child, but at the same time, I was more scared of having my parents have to come to school and deal with me than I ever would have been in the police locking me up.
Okay.
But outside the household, no matter what, mother used to say all the time, don't get locked up because I ain't coming to get you.
Okay. I feel like we can focus on, with all of this domestic violence occurring, what can we do to reduce it, prevent it? And I think personally, like it's something that has to start very early with attitudes of children, dating relationships. If people know, how to choose or select, the right partner, conflict resolution, teaching there are other ways to resolve conflicts other than fighting. If you have some thoughts on that.
You know what? I'm not even qualified to answer that question.
But you talked about because I heard you say earlier, even with all the programs they had with the people who were constantly fighting with the interventions and the court interventions, that nothing changed. But something has to be something to change the behavior, the patterns.
And I don't see it change.
You don't see it changing? Nothing?
And let me tell you why. This has been consistent since the beginning of time. Here it is, 2020. We just started a new decade. Still fresh into a new century. And we still talking about the same issues.
Well, I think now people are more open than maybe they have been in the past. I think we're talking about it more.
We have the Me Too movement. We have Black Lives Matter. We have all of these movements, all of these different groups, all of these different. But one thing they're not is consistent. They only become relevant again when there's another high-profile issue for somebody to jump on the bandwagon. Bottom line is, even the best of us, whether you're a pastor, police officer, doctor, lawyer, school teacher, all of us at some point in time may find ourselves in a domestic violence situation, whether we are the victims or the perpetrators. Because now you don't even really have to physically be beating somebody, but you can make threats. Or you can just go to, just to grab somebody, keep them on, or even to pull somebody off you. And the first thing, you put your hands on me. You know, and the sad part about it, a lot of times for officers responding, it comes down to who called the police first or who called the police at all. One of the things law enforcement have to learn to do, especially male officers, don't rush in with the mentality being the knight in shining armor and automatically assume the man wants to violate in all domestic cases anymore. You know, I have a neighbor who has been battered consistently by the wife. Recently, I assisted in a situation at the house. He calls me and said, hey, listen, she's at it again. I'm not going to put the hands, you come over. You know, I'm going to make the call. I made a 911 call, but I want you to stand by until they get there. And he ain't no little dude.
He called 911? Or you called?
Yes, he did.
And what happened when 911 came?
All he wanted was his to get out. Get his stuff and get out the house.
Okay.
He wanted me to stand by in case there's any accusation that he hit me or he did anything.
So did he return or he left for
Absolutely not.
Okay.
This was his final straw.
Okay.
He's a big guy in terms of size. Okay. She's a little.
Okay.
And
she was hitting him, or?
He is one of those who's a gentle giant. She's one of them. Napoleon ain't got nothing on her.
So she was hitting him, or what?
And it's not. This has been consistent throughout the relationship. He's not going to hit back.
But she was hitting, kicking, or what was she doing?
Oh, you know, this took place before I got there. Okay. So I didn't physically witness it. But according to him, it's always, you know, get mad or whatever. And, you know, and he'd be like, you know, I just take it. Okay. But got to a point, couldn't take it no more. Okay. It's like.
Until he got out.
But again, this is a perfect example of men. And he was rare in this case, because even the officers responded. When we was out there talking, one of them actually made a case, man, can't believe he called us for us. Called us for
this. But
I
really do think that something can be done in terms of changing attitudes, starting early in school, about conflict resolution, that you don't have to deal with violence.
But we have all that, Doc, and it's still not.
I don't know to what extent they're doing it, but.
And 9 times out of 10, especially when you have domestic cases, abusers, and a lot of, and I hate to use the term abusers, so a lot of these individuals.
Are they teaching courses in schools?
Because, you know, even the court mandate that anger management.
But I'm saying, we're talking about with adults, I'm saying starting early, getting kids early on to learn conflict resolution, that violence is not the way to end conflicts.
You're talking about trying to teach something in school that
starting
even parents,
early.
You got to keep in mind, these are school systems where parents have done it. They didn't want their child being taught sex education.
Exactly. I remember being involved in a situation
so they're not going to allow you to add sex education to the curriculum in school.
No, but conflict resolution, that's something that everybody needs that skill.
But no, everybody needs that skill. But it has to be voluntary for them to want it.
No, not voluntary. No, it's something that needs to be incorporated to the curriculum from grade school through high school.
Well, Doc,
I really firmly believe that.
Yeah, but you cannot introduce something in the curriculum parents won't support and allow.
But I can't see how parents would not want to support something conflict resolution. That's a skill that everyone needs to learn.
But that's also, you can't understand why parents want sex education in the school.
Right, but that's something different. That's more of a touchy subject. But conflict resolution is a skill that every person, child, adolescent, adult, can utilize.
I mean,
so I totally disagree.
I understand what you're saying, Doc, but it's still a social skill.
Which is what we are, social beings. We learn to live in
sex education is a social skill. Right.
That's different. Sex education is different than teaching conflict resolution.
But it's still interpersonal relations.
Right, which is
and
very
at the end of the
important.
day, that's what comes down. Because normally when we start even talk about rape and sexual assault, that word power keep coming back.
Right.
And it coming back how you were socialized, how you were raised in that.
Exactly.
And we started looking at the background of the individual. And we start asking ourselves, why does this individual do? We're stunned. They're still wondering
why
teachers.
Different points, like in high school, you can teach about dating violence. So helping young women to understand what abuse is in a relationship, helping young men to understand that.
Hey,
when no means no.
Support in what you say, what you could.
Why are you so resistant to that? I really don't.
It's not me. You got to keep in mind there's school boards.
But it sounds like you're playing devil's advocate because any normal, rational person would want that.
Yeah, but you keep saying any normal. You keep forgetting right here in the state of Georgia, probably about 10 years ago, the Cobb County school system lost its accreditation because you had so-called school board members, that were made up the community elected positions in these positions fighting over which best way to run this school. One wanted this. Let's go to Texas. Do you remember in Texas when the textbooks? They wanted the textbooks removed because it taught evolution. And the good Christians in that state said...
You're talking about religion. That's religion. We're not talking about religion. We're not talking about sex. But those are emotionally charged subjects.
And so with domestic violence, it's emotionally charged subject.
When I say conflict resolution, understanding dating violence, that's not emotionally charged like sex and religion.
But, even colleges...
just open your mind.
Even colleges in Title X just recently started implementing this.
That's what I'm saying. But it needs to start earlier than that. College is too late.
But you got to keep in mind, have you ever been a member of your school board? Or when your son was in school, have you ever...
I'm PTA and things like that. I was very involved in the PTA. And that's where, when the whole sex education, because I was one that was wanting to promote it like at 3rd and 4th grade, and the other parents were against
exactly.
that.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. The other parent, and the other parents shut it down.
Different. That's sex and that's religion. That's different.
But regardless of subject,
conflict resolution
even conflict resolution, if the other parent don't want you teaching, they don't want that domestic violence.
That is you can say domestic. I'm talking about conflict resolution. That's learning skills and how to deal with conflict. That's normal skills in terms of how to function in society.
I do understand what you're saying.
I said conflict resolution.
Doc, I'm with you. But here's where I'm going to have to share this with you. If that was so rational, if it was valued as a skill in our communities, that should have been one of the foundations what school was taught on in the first place, the school curriculum. Here we are, this day and age, we can't even control bullying in school. That's the biggest problem we got right now that has a lot to do with the suicide rate, especially
so all of that those are all skills that people need to learn.
And none of that's being taught.
But that's why I'm saying, that's the whole point I'm saying, those things need to be taught early on. And again, separating that from sex and the religious stuff, those are emotionally charged. But when you come back, not an emotionally charged issue.
But you keep saying it should be taught. What I'm saying to you is,
if it's why
is it not being taught?
Well, if it hasn't been, it's something that I'm saying in terms of when we project, what can we do? This is what I'm saying as a solution. It's something that can be done. Is to promote those kinds of programs.
See, that's where the slippery slope comes in.
It's not a slippery slope.
If it's not a slippery slope,
okay, well, let's change the subject because obviously we don't see eye to eye in that. There are issues in terms of domestic violence, like with those, I forgot what it's called, where someone who has a history of domestic violence can't purchase a firearm. What are those laws called?
There have been laws that is convicted, and it was initially the felony counts of convicted. Now it's even a misdemeanor. And as you see in quite a few cases, even accusations of domestic violence now can be a hindrance to careers or jobs but
in terms of firearm possession, what is that called? Something like if you have history of domestic violence, you can't
especially
get a
on the ATL forms when you purchase a firearm from a gun store, one of the questions is, have you ever been convicted of domestic violence, even as a misdemeanor?
Okay.
And if you check yes, and honestly say, yeah, you know what, there was an incident 20 years ago, that may be just a justification for to be denied you the right to purchase a firearm.
So domestic violence can be a misdemeanor or a felony?
Yes.
So what's the difference between the misdemeanor and felony?
When you murder someone, that's what? That's a felony, right?
Oh, the homicide. Okay, I thought you meant
And
Not domestic violence, but didn't result in murder.
when you start talking felonies of higher aggravated in nature, in other words, murder, aggravated assault, rape, forcible rape, sodomy, and people don't realize in the state of Georgia, under Georgia law currently, a man can't be raped. You can only be sodomized, but you can't be raped.
Okay.
When you start talking about misdemeanor domestic violence, it's threatening. Now we got the text threatening. You got the Facebook in terms of what they call it, cyberbullying and so forth. You also have touching or the peeping Tom. Now you got more and more men or women for that matter, peeping Tom, putting cameras in bathrooms.
Oh yeah, I've seen that before.
And even crazy, what we call aggravated battery in terms of you touching or feeling, you bumping into someone. And I was amazed to discover people get sexual gratification from bumping in. You're in a crowded elevator. You just think, well, somebody, we crowded, people rubbing up against you. But who thinks somebody's actually getting sexual gratification by that, incidental contact? It takes all types of the world. Yes. I guess it's kind of weird. But yes, they are misdemeanor and felony counts of domestic violence. And it comes down to basically you look at the elements of the crime to determine how you charge that individual.
Let's see, because there was an incident in Milwaukee where this man set his this man he poured gasoline on his woman, lit her on fire, and left her, to burn. So they charged him with attempted first-degree intentional homicide, first-degree reckless injury, domestic abuse. That's what they charged him with, yeah.
And in the state of Georgia, that would have been aggravated assault.
This is in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, recently.
It's each state is unique in terms of how it terms the terms it used to the elements of its crime. Most of them are standardized nationwide, but even if the naming is a little different, I have no answers to how to prevent domestic violence in terms of really changing human nature, I should say. It's emotionally charged.
It's human nature, but I'm talking about changing attitudes, not necessarily human nature, but attitudes, insight, educating people.
And that all sounds good.
Okay.
It sounds like we have public service announcements for everything, but people still do it. We remember when you used to have the commercials that crack an egg in a frying pan. This is your mind on drugs. And all it did was increase the drug rates. People couldn't wait to get out there and beat that egg. Domestic violence. We sit there and talk about preventing and stopping and now why we do domestic violence, but we see our how should I say celebrities and all of these high profile people who either are abusers or being abused, the victims, and these domestic violence thing. And it's like, wow, if it can happen to them, who makes me any different? We fail to realize domestic violence starts as early as middle school. That's
why I keep saying education has to start early. I'm sorry, if you have an attitude of nothing can be done, then nothing can be done. But I tend to have an optimistic side.
Understand what I'm saying? I'm not saying nothing can be. What I'm saying is the people who are responsible for doing it.
It's human nature, but I disagree with you wholeheartedly. I vehemently disagree with you on that.
What I want you to tell me, this is 2020. This has been an issue, a vice, a evil of human mankind, of civilization since the beginning of time. With everything we have created, everything we have done, everything we have educated
but we haven't done all the efforts. Is what I'm saying. We haven't done. We've done some things, but we can do a better job.
So, such as what? That's what I'm trying to understand.
That's what I spent the last several minutes talking about, and I'm it's obviously you're not listening to what I was saying because that's what I've been saying.
I'm listening to what you're saying, but you're
disagreeing with it. Your mind is closed. You need to Open
the
your
mind is not closed.
It is closed.
It's rational to the point.
No, your mind is closed.
You got to keep in mind, parents is only going to allow you to teach to their children.
I know, but only
you say implementing something in school.
That's emotionally charged. Conflict resolution is not an emotionally charged issue like sex education or the other, religious things that people like, evolution. Those are totally different types of topics. But anyway, obviously, your mind is going to stay closed, so I'll leave it closed like that.
My mind can't be closed if it's not automatically taught in schools already.
Right.
Elementary school, middle school, high school.
That has to be.
And if we're dealing with bullying right now, and we can't even stop control bullying, so that conflict resolution is still not something that's universally being done.
That's the point. That's the problem. That's the issue. But you won't even see where it's something that could be helpful. Your mind is totally closed.
It's not a matter of me. What I keep telling you,
your mind is closed.
You have to. You can't implement something in a institution that they don't value and won't allow.
But you don't know that. This is in your mind. You don't know that.
It's not a matter in my mind, because if that was the case, Doc, we wouldn't have this bullying situation. That's the number one thing in schools right now, that administrations turn a blind eye and still haven't got. Our suicide rates are increasing. You have said so yourself. We have several situations of young men and women.
Doesn't mean you only tackle one thing at a time.
It doesn't matter how many times. The point is, we had people dying.
But you can tackle more than one issue at a time. Is what I'm saying.
So why haven't we?
You can address bullying. You can address, domestic violence and conflict resolution. You don't have to just do one thing at a time.
But Doc, the fact remains. If it was that simple to administer,
I didn't think it was simple. I can say it's a different mindset. It's an open mind.
Implemented that nationwide. We have a bullying problem in our schools nationwide.
Okay, Paul. Okay,
I'm just trying to say.
I'm just saying, as a physician, a person who knows about public health, those are what you call public health policies we call primary prevention, secondary and tertiary prevention. Preventing something before it happens, addressing once there's a problem, or addressing it once the problem becomes a problem. You want to focus on primary prevention, which means addressing an issue before it happens. That's what public health is, a public health policy, and that's what I'm talking about.
Why is it not mandatory? Mandated.
Public health, I'm saying whatever it takes, but it is something that we need to do as a nation to address this whole issue. And that's the last I'm saying on that.
Wow.
But I do want to say, give out the hotline number. The National Domestic Violence Hotline number is 800-799-SAFE. Again, 800-799-SAFE. This is the hotline for crisis intervention for domestic violence.
I got a question. When you have a client, let's say he's the abuser, or she's the abuser, and they come to you, or they're court mandated to come to you to help change their mindset about their use of violence to, I said, in a relationship, they think it's normal. How would you go about really helping the people understand their use of violence in their relationship is not acceptable?
Well, I know there are programs like that. I'm not familiar with them, so whatever, I'm sure they have like some kind of format that they use. I've not been involved with programs like that. I've not had anybody court mandated. Everyone that I have ever seen, comes to me for voluntary reasons.
Wow. Because again, I know a lot of the programs that are court mandated for, especially anger management, is the number one that most violators are sent to. And even the victims, anger man, then they send them to classes for teach them parenting skills. Again, conflict resolution, which I thought would have been a part of anger management, come to find out that's something totally different in itself. With all of these resources, with all of this education, at what point do we have to stop saying, hey,
you're talking about what's called the tertiary prevention. That's after the problem has already occurred. I'm talking about what's called, again, primary prevention before it occurs, and that's where the focus needs to be. So you're talking about the third. That's at the last step.
Okay, then when we have done everything we can to prevent, and it's
But we
still
haven't,
occurs.
though. That's the problem. We haven't. That's the whole point that I'm making. That's the whole point. We have not addressed it from a primary
you had the
prevention
power
standpoint.
at this point in your career to really make changes in the laws, just the United States of America, to really facilitate resolving domestic violence issue, give me 4 top things that you would do.
As I've said, I keep repeating myself. You're obviously not listening. Primary prevention, preventing this before it happens, which involves starting grade school, junior high, high school, addressing all the issues, conflict resolution, dating violence, things like that. As I've always said, education with schools, with doctors' offices, the public. I mean, whatever involves just a massive, wide primary effort before it happens. As I've said before, many, many times this evening. So.
All right, then I'm going to say it again. To the best of my knowledge, we're already doing all
No,
those
we're
things.
not. We are not, Paul. Obviously not. We're not doing it. We're not doing it. We're addressing, like you said, with the courts when they come in. It's after the violence has already occurred. That's what's called the tertiary prevention. Once the problem has occurred, that's what we're focusing on. But we need to go back even before any of the violence happens, changing education.
Well, I can share with you.
Minds and mindsets.
I was one of the officers sitting in a program several years ago where we were going to high crime areas. We were going into the schools. It was like an officer-friendly program back in the day. We were part of a community revitalization program by HUD called the Good Neighbor Program, where we actually were teaching or attempting to teach people not only crime prevention, but domestic violence was a major issue then, to the extent where I'm surprised we're still dealing with it to this extent today. In so many cases, as we started to really tell people how to prevent domestic violence, how to mitigate the sign, they did have counselors as well as mental health professionals on hand to really start teaching those the effect of domestic violence on the family and so forth. The program was supposed to be an ongoing, consistent.
What was it called?
We called the Good Neighbor Program.
And who was families?
It was administered by HUD, Housing, Urban and Development.
Okay.
It was a federal program to start, because as they started to slowly tear down all the projects and housing, we had high crime housing area, not just in the metro Atlanta, but throughout the United States of America. There was a program, the Good Housing Program was designed to get people who've been literally institutionalized in these projects for generations acclimated to going into communities now where you're trying to help them break the cycle of poverty and crime and everything that they know, and turn them into what the system considered to be productive citizens.
So you're trying to change their mindset.
Trying to change the mindset.
Exactly.
And when I sit there and tell you that program became mandatory for everyone living in housing projects, because they started doing they have 3 years. They did it on an age basis, but bottom line is it was 3 years for you to get yourself situated, start teaching job. They was working with employers.
On adults, teenagers, children.
It was primarily adults 18 and over, because the rationality was the adults, especially ones who had kids, that this was to help support the family unit, supposed to take away the dysfunctional and the poverty and make the family unit stronger. Basically, turn these into productive citizens, as you say. And what was amazing, I'm looking back at that experience, I was a part of that for about a year and a half. I took the crime prevention process and did a little bit of the domestic violence. I don't even know what happened to it. The program didn't, you know how you set up a goal and you say, well, on such and such, this goal, we have a year to do this. It just abruptly one day just ended. Just here like, hey, you know what? After doing this for a while, that this is done.
So before it ended, did you sense any results at all?
Be honest with you, it hit the sad part about it. It didn't take long to realize that the expectations of the program were not realistic. Number one, these high crime houses are already going, regardless whether the people accepted or brought into the philosophy or changed their life, didn't make a difference because these projects were already going to be torn down anyway. That was already slated. And then a lot of these individuals were on Section 8 HUD vouchers, which allowed them to now housing authorities throughout the United States of America. And based on the Fair Housing Act, they could go live anywhere they want. And communities and jurisdictions and neighborhoods, landlords, whatever you said, could not turn them away because they had a voucher or they were deemed undesirable in that community. Because now you'd be discriminatory. And in terms of the changing their mindset and their way of life, unfortunately, we never tracked the number of those who really benefited from crime. Because I'm pretty sure those who broke the cycle, but every day on the news, even now, we see where crimes have now become the norm in a lot of areas that took high numbers of these individuals and communities that never before had this kind of crime. And it's like, wow, we thought we were doing something good to change the lives.
Well, you were doing something good.
And unfortunately, it's like, where did we go wrong? Did we not use the right method? Did we not teaching them the right skill? Did we not connect with them on a mental level to show, listen, you deserve better. We're not trying to take your home away from you. We're trying to change your mindset to give you a better quality of life. So, it's like when we do it with our consumers and we trying to transition them into independent living. It's difficult to take someone who's been up under that bridge forever, and that's their way of life.
Somebody who's been institutionalized to be in jails or things like that, but it's something that's worth an effort.
And this is where I say, I don't support domestic violence, but do you think, just as human, doesn't feel like sometimes we've been institutionalized to think that that's just what we do?
See, that's the mindset. That's what I'm saying. It's changing your mindset. I'm going to leave it at that. It's about changing your mindset. So I want to thank everyone for listening. This is Mind Matters. We've been talking about love and homicide. So true love doesn't involve the need to control or hurt or kill anyone else. True love is loving that other person as you love yourself. The domestic violence hotline is 800-799-SAFE, which translates to 800-799-7233. Again, 800-799-SAFE. That's the National Domestic Violence Hotline.